All right, the dreaded gimbal lock. Now, this is all down to the orientation of our joint. Oh, this one's a bit fucked. Let's fix that one up. Orient to world if we can, and do not click that. Apply. That fixes that up. Yep, that fixed that one up. Yeah, that one was a bit screwy. Let's make sure that was okay, and it looks okay now. Good. Um, we need to think about the common rotations that we're going to be working with and how to avoid gimbal lock. So, in order to visualize how gimbal lock actually behaves or how the axes are actually behaving, we're going to double click on our rotation tool, and that should bring up our options here, or it will bring up a pop up, whatever you have your default set to. And we're going to set the axis orientation to gimbal. Click that. Great. And now we can have a 100% accurate representation of what's going on in our rotations. Now, we need to switch over to the attribute editor as well, and we need to look at our rotation order there. Okay. So looking at our rotations here, we have a rotation order of X, Y, and Z, which means that in um, in the order on which we can rotate things, Z will drive both X and Y axes as a whole. It's sort of like the parent of X and Y. And then Y will influence X, but not affect Z because Y is, in essence, a child of the Z axis. Okay. So if we were to rotate Y a little bit too much, and then we cross the X axis over to the Z axis, we lose an order of rotation. So effectively, we only have two axes to work with because now X and Z are effectively on the same rotational plane. Okay. Whereas now, if we look at X, X is sort of living in its own world. It's sort of independent at this point. But if we rotate Y again, as you can see, we lose an order of rotation. Now, what we need to do is understand which are the most common rotational attributes that we are going to be working with. So we know that our primary axis is Y. It's the one going up the joint chain. Right now, it's being driven first and foremost by Z, which is one of the least common, I guess you can say, rotations that we're going to be working with. So what we want to do is have Y be least affected by all of this. So when you look at the rotation order here and you look at the pattern here, Z is affecting Y, which is affecting X. Now, if we want Y to be the least affected out of the lot, what we can do is change the rotation order to reflect that. So it kind of works in opposite. So if we want Y to be least affected here, then we can use a rotation order of Y, X, Z, or Y, Z, X to drive our animation. So let's have a look and see what we have. We have Y, Z, X. And now if we look at this now, X is, well, let's have a look at that again. X is driving, let's try that again. Y, Z, X. So if we rotate along X now, it's moving the entire body. Right? Cool. If we now move Z, it's affecting Y along this axis, which is not that common. And then we have Y, which is doing its thing. So in essence, this is not a bad rotation order to work with because we have our primary rotation, which will be probably bending back and forward, doing its thing quite well. We have Z only affecting gimbal lock if we get this guy moving into a horizontal stance, which is not very likely. And then Y is just doing its thing. Let's have a look at Y, X, Z. All right, so this is the one where Z is the primary rotator. It's affecting the entire setup here. Okay, not bad, not bad. Now, if we bend the body forward on X, which is our secondary axis, again, similar sort of thing, unless we're bending it right horizontal this way, we don't lose an order of rotation. And of course, Y is still independent. Now, this is down to your judgment as a rigger and as an animator, what you think the animator will be doing most often. Will the animator be bending the body forward this much or bending the body sideways this much more often than not? I'm going to wager that I would be much less likely to rotate the body this way as I am this way. So therefore, I'm going to go ahead and go with the rotate order of Y, X, Z, X. Now, I hope that all made sense. I know it's a lot of heady bullshit, but that's the thing about Maya. You got to think about these things in logical steps. All right, so let's go ahead and do the same thing along all these joints. Just change the rotation order to Y, Z, X, right up the chest. Now, if you think that the body would be tilting its head back and forward more often than not, you could change it along the neck, but in my case, definitely not. So just going to do the same thing up the joint chain, YZX, YZX, YZX. We can close this, by the way. We don't need this anymore. So I'm just going to close that away. Now let's have a look at the shoulders now. So the shoulders, our primary rotation is going to be this way. And X isn't really being affected all that much by that either. So that's great. Now let's have a look at the Y motion. That's not too bad, actually. That's cool. And then if we rotate along this way, the likelihood of us getting into gimbal lock, you aren't going to rotate the shoulder all that much in this orientation. So therefore, I'm actually kind of happy with the rotation order of the shoulder. I might actually keep it as is for now. We can always change it in the future. But for now, I think that will be fine. Yeah, I think that would be okay. We could double check though. Let's go ahead and change it to say Y, X, Z. So that way, that way. So you'll run into gimbal lock quite easily if you bring the shoulder that forward. You're going to break the shoulder anyway, but again, you're still prone to it. So I'm actually going to keep it as X, Y, Z for now. Let's have a look at the arms now. Let's have a look at the bicep. So the bicep, for the most part, is going to be like this, downwards, when we start doing a walk cycle, for instance. All right, let's have a look upwards. That's okay. Rolling, however, could be an issue. But again, the likelihood of you rolling the arm that far out could be problematic. Yes, it could be problematic. But what we care about the most is this one here, back and forward, up and down. And so far, that's working pretty good. But let's have a look at the rotation order of Y, X, Z. Let's have a look and see what we got here. So if we bring that back up here, that's working all right. So Z, if we're rotating that on Z, that's doing all right. Rotate on Y, That's just spinning on its own. Fine. Bring the arm forward. And this is an issue here that I think you'd probably encounter way more often. Gimbal lock when you bring the arm up. Now that is problematic. So that rotation order is a no-go. Let's try YZX, and already gimbal lock central. So again, XYZ could be not bad. I might actually roll with that for now. So yeah, I think that's looking all right. I think that will be okay. So again, rolling on Y is probably the least likely outcome. So I'm going to roll with that along the arm for now. XYZ, I think will be okay. Now, as for the fingers, so let's have a look at the fingers now. Rotate. We're only going to rotate it on one axis, so it doesn't really matter. So gimbal lock in the fingers is highly unlikely. So again, XYZ, I think, is going to suit us just fine. The only likelihood of you using get into gimbal lock is by rolling the fingers this way, which is just no, it's not going to happen. So that is fine. XYZ along the arms. All right, cool. Let's try this on the legs. That's fine. Again, the likelihood of you rolling the leg out to the side like this is pretty unlikely because you're most likely going to be doing this instead. So again, XYZ seems to be safe. Again, you're not going to do that very often. You may do that in the foot though. So you may encounter some gimbal lock issues in the foot in the future. So you may want to change that. But again, it's working okay. Again, it's only if you roll it and really roll it hard that you're going to run into gimbal lock in that regard. So again, XYZ seems to be fine for this particular setup of the rig. Now, as for the global control, who cares? You're just going to place the rig there. That's just there for placing the rig in place anyway. So yeah, don't worry about that one all that much. Okay, we are finally ready to mirror out this rig. So with all that done, all that figured out, let's go ahead and mirror these joints. So we're just going to go ahead and select from the shoulder downwards and from the thigh. So select those two there. Go to skeleton, mirror joints, open up the mirror tab, and we're going to go down this way. So we're just going to go YZ, behavior, push apply. Oh, shit. Too many arguments. Oh, yeah, you got to do it one at a time. So this one here, shoulder first, apply, done. This one here, apply, done. All right, sweet. So now our base deform rig is ready to roll. Okay, so this part's optional, I guess, depending on how far you want the rig to go in terms of deformation. But we need to add a jaw joint and some eye joints. So let's go ahead and do that very quickly. So if we go into our view here, let's go into our side view here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate this joint here. And then just bring it down like so. Just to sit around the base of the jawline. So around there. I'm then going to duplicate that again and put that down near the chin. I'm going to reparent this joint to this joint there. And that will end up being our jaw joint. So I'm going to actually select this one here, rename it as jaw. This one here can be called, yeah, just jaw end. Great. All right. The next one I want to do is my lip. So actually I want to have two joints, one on the top of the lip, one on the bottom lip. One joint will be a child of the head joint. One will be a child of the jaw joint. So I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate this one, move it over here, duplicate this one, move it over here. Now this one is already a child of the jaw, whereas this one needs to be a child of the head. So I'm going to select the head joint, push P, and although it looks a little bit weird, you'll understand. So if I go ahead and try and rotate the jaw joint now, it's moving the bottom lip. If I'm moving the head joint, it's moving everything. If it lets me, there we go. But then we can still manipulate the upper lip separately. Okay, which is just what we need. Let's go ahead and rename that one. Let's call this one lip bottom. Rename this one lip top. All right. Now, for these joints, I actually want them to be oriented to the world without being affected by, the world space. So it's fine the way they are. This one again is fine, so I don't have to worry about reorienting those. Again, say with the jaw, I think who cares? That one's fine too, because in the case of our rotations, it's rotating how we want to already. So if I would go ahead and rotate this now, rotate is in positive when we open the jaw, negative when we want to close the jaw. When we want to move the lip up, it's going in translate Y, just what we want. So that's fine. The other two things to do is now the eyes. So I'm actually going to duplicate this joint here one more time and just move it aside because it's going to be a child of the head joint anyway. Let's go ahead and call that I underscore L. And what we want to do is snap this to the center of our eye group. Now we have an issue. The eye objects, if we unparent this, unlink this, you'll see that the eyes are actually one unit. So we have to eyeball the the joint to sort of fit in the center of that eye. So we're just going to go ahead and hide away the face for now. Go in, hide away the hair, and then I'm going to eyeball the location of this joint. So I'm just going to go into front view to start off with. And you can actually use X-ray joints to turn that on. Or you can also turn on X-ray in general to see through the mesh. But we're just going to go ahead and line that up as close as possible to the center of that eye in the front. And then in the side view, I'm going to do the same thing in the center of that eye. So just bring that right center like so. And there we have it. That one's fine. And again, in terms of orientation, let's just save that. Um, translate Y, translate X. In terms of rotations, doesn't really matter because it's going to be pretty limited in what it can do. So rotate X is fine. Y, the likelihood of you getting gimbal lock in an eye is almost impossible. So there we go. Leave it as is. And then it's going to mirror that out. So just push apply and then it's mirrored. We can unhide the hair now and the mesh, get out of X-ray view, lock off that geometry. And now we're golden. Great. So now we have everything we need to skin this mesh.